This is Patrick Daly and welcome to Interlinks. Interlinks is a programme about globalisation and the effects it has had on Ireland and other countries around the world over the last 50 years or so. In each programme, we interview a person from another country or with strong connections to another country to get their unique perspective on globalisation as it has affected them, the country they live in, and its relationship with the wider world. There's a little bit of history, a dash of economics, a sprinkling of business, and an overlay of personal experience, both from me and from my interviewees from around the world. In recent programmes, we have visited many countries around the world, and today we're going back across the Atlantic to Orlando, Florida, to speak with Stefan Bungart, who is the Global Head of Digitisation for Siemens Power Generation Services, where he leads product and market strategy, partnerships, channel development and customer projects. Stefan is originally from Germany and has lived and worked in the US, UK, Ireland, Germany, Switzerland, Hong Kong and Singapore. Previous positions that Stefan has held included Head of European Internet of Things Business Development for Cisco Manufacturing Industries. He has also worked for General Electric, Deutsche Telekom, IBM. And Stefan and I originally met around 1997 when he was living in Ireland and I had just returned to Ireland after a 10-year stint living in Spain. And our paths have crossed again recently on LinkedIn. And I think we may be seeing him again soon around these parts, as he might tell us a little later more about that in the interview. So I am delighted to have Stefan join us on the line from Orlando, Florida. So, Stefan, over the last 20 years or so, you've worked with a succession of very noteworthy companies such as IBM, GE, Cisco, Deutsche Telekom and so on. And I saw a video of you online giving a talk about the future of work, and you describe yourself as a job nomad or a project worker. What are these concepts and how do you see the future of work developing for people over the next 5, 10 or 15 years?
When I started off in working life very early on, career was defined as a linear succession of promotions, most likely, and along one path of expertise. I.e., if you had studied or learned something about supply chain, you would be in supply chain and you'd be there all your life. And I do know people that actually had exactly that career. My career has been very, very different. And I think my career reflects more what we see and experience in today's work environment. And that is a series of projects that may be very different in nature and have nothing to do with your original specialization or what you have learned in school or at university, but rather a series of projects that allow you to gather skills and very different skills and experiences that enable you to handle complexity and decisions, whether they are related to your original area of expertise or not. And in my working life, I have worked in transport, logistics, but also marketing, finance, and other projects. And lately, of course, started to really specialize around strategy for digital technology applications and how that can transform businesses and business models. And so I think that the modern, well, it's not even a concept, I think it just emerged, is that your long-term career as a series of promotions is dead. Mm-hmm. What it has been replaced with is a succession of projects that may be very different in nature and that require you to learn every and each time, and that over time allow you to handle more complex things.
And are you an unusual beast, if you like, in the corporate world as a job nomad, a project worker, or are there many people like you in corporate life today?
I don't think I'm unusual. I think that there are many colleagues, when I talk to them, they reflect similar sentiments. When I talk to other people working across the globe in jobs similar to mine, or at least in non-administrative jobs, you hear very similar experiences. Younger people very much reflect the same, with all the advantages and disadvantages and the risks associated with it. I had a discussion recently around this, and someone pointed out that while it was true that working life and career was kind of changing in that way, and that it was more the model that kind of started to emerge, it also exposed people to risks that they were not exposed to before, both in terms of their, the stress, the experiences, but also the financial risks involved in this. You can't plan your life the same way that you may have been able to do 25 years ago, or your parents were able to do, and you don't have the same security in life that maybe your parents enjoyed. No, and they also pointed out that maybe when you look at more regular administrative jobs, then again that variability would not be experienced the same way. Having said that, I believe that my way of working and the kind of project nature of work is not unusual. It's actually becoming something that is very normal.
Yeah. So we've got this, on the one hand, this changing nature of work. On the other hand, we have the technological advances, the digitization of business, Internet of Things, the confluence of many technologies now, robotics, analytics, artificial intelligence, and so on. So where is the human actor in all of this? Do you see this technology ultimately replacing humans wholesale or augmenting their capabilities?
So I don't think that the technologies that we currently have replace humans. And I also don't think that humans generally will be replaced with whatever technology follows in future. I do think that the relationship between humans and technology, and the interaction and the way we integrate with technology changes. It's already changing around us without us really knowing. And what we did 20 years ago is not what we do today, and we don't even notice that it is very different, and that we do very different jobs, and we use technology in very different ways. And I think that is going to continue. And I also think that there are activities that will be replaced by technology and are already being replaced by technology today. One example are more administrative, repetitive tasks that we replace with software that allows us to kind of remove the requirement for data entry, for example, or simple transactions and managing simple processes. That can all be done by software today, and as software sophistication grows, more complex tasks can also be taken on. We see also, that impacting traditional jobs. One good example: Uber versus taxi drivers. Mm-hmm. Right? Uber, basically, a taxi driver wouldn't have thought that software actually attacks his business model, right? But it does, and so we'll see that. And but I don't think that humans ultimately get replaced by that. That would be a very utopian scenario. Even Star Trek didn't kind of go that far.
Utopian or even dystopian, maybe, yeah?
Dystopian, maybe, yes. But I do think that, what we consider work and what is involved in working, that will change.
Yeah.
Right? It won't be what we understand it to be today, and what we understand it to be today wasn't what we understood it to be 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And 20 years from now, again, we say, I work, but what that means will be different.
Sure. And so therefore the impact on people's requirements for learning, education and training, so both people like us who are mature and have a career, or we're on a career path, and people who are coming in as children, young adults, in terms of their learning, what would you be advising your own children, for example?
Children and young people in particular are already growing up in a very different relationship with technology, and they use technology in very much more symbiotic ways than we at our age would probably do. And so I am not so worried about, structured learning. It's experiential learning that these younger people have, that helps them deal and actually really make good use of technology. And for us older people that have probably more experience in life, but at the same time also not had that very very close relationship with technology as we grew up. It is a more structured and deliberate effort to open ourselves up to the possibilities and not succumb to the immunity to change that is inherent in all of us. Cost, I think, like $2-3 a piece, and today you get them for sub-cent prices. And RFID tech have entirely changed the way we do. We organize ourselves in warehouses, or to track goods. So the reassuring thing about logistics and supply chain for me is that at the end of the day, we are still dealing with physical activities. With all the data layers and all the sophistication and all the analytics on top of it, at the end of the day, there's still a process of getting things from one place to another place in an ideal way, and that will not go away. What we have seen is that companies invest in productivity tools. We for example, we use software to do pattern analytics in our data, i.e., we capture data from across our supply chain and have it analyzed to identify changing patterns in supply and demand, and then suggest strategies for adjusting the infrastructure. Like, is that warehouse still in the right place? Should we move it somewhere else? Is it even right to have like 5 warehouses, or do you want 3? Questions like that become easier to answer, and you can even sort of with the part of the infrastructure that is more physical, you can become more flexible and adaptable.
And what are the main considerations and challenges that these companies face when they're considering where to locate their operations in the world as it is today?
Well, again, I think that the general principle is that your investment strategy follows your business pattern, and it's pretty much based around where in the world you are active and how successful you are, and then sort of model the infrastructure you require to optimize your business activities accordingly. For us, it is always a constant evaluation of cost versus speed versus flexibility versus customer service capabilities and the quality, and to juggle all these kind of different variables that you have that influence that and impact that is the difficult bit. But we, as I say, the way you actually set up infrastructure these days is different from even 25 years ago, and the way you can adapt and open, close, and move infrastructure has also dramatically improved. You look at Amazon, for example, and the way that they can very flexibly set up operations or move operations depending on the patterns that they have in their distribution, is quite something to behold. And when you go into one of their warehouses and you see the degree of automation that they have already achieved, and the degree of the human intervention required reduced to almost like a skeleton staff, then you can easily see how they can open and close and move these things much more rapidly than you could have done 20 years ago, when you had to recruit people, skill them for a year or two, and then you were loath to say, okay, I've invested all that money, now let's kind of move it somewhere else.
Yeah. This is the idea of managing risk. I've been thinking about this recently, that what's going on in the world, and particularly when you're plugged into social media, watching the news and so on, you get the perception that the world is a very, very risky place. But I guess some of these companies take a more sophisticated, informed view of risk, and they're able to do things and make moves that allows them to be to take advantageous positions with regard to other companies who don't have that sophistication. Is that a right observation? Do you see it that way, or do you have another view of how they view, evaluate, and manage risk?
Yeah, no, I would agree that the more capable your tool set to allow you to analyze, understand, and respond to risk, the better you are prepared for eventualities. For example, work we're doing with some of our customers is around helping them to understand their risk position and flexibly plan scenarios. And then according to these scenarios, have response ready for eventualities, right? So we use sophisticated data analytics and things like Monte Carlo simulations to allow us to model and simulate different outcomes depending on decisions we might take, and that allows us to hedge better and manage the risk better. Mm-hmm. But there's also, of course, an element of risk that has to do with culture, and when you compare, for example, a U.S. business run by U.S. educated leaders to a German business run by German educated leaders, you see a very different understanding of risk and a very different way to deal with risk and risk acceptance, right? Like the Americans are far easier with risk than the Germans, for example.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. And we'll actually come to that cultural aspect in a minute, given the fact that you've lived in so many places. Just as we've been coming forward over the last 20, 30 years, and we spoke earlier about the way we have almost taken for granted the technological change that's gone on around us, businesses have changed in the sense that back in the 70s and the 60s and earlier on, businesses tended to be much more vertically integrated in that they did everything they needed themselves. And now, almost unknown to the wider public, and sometimes even unknown to the people inside the businesses, they're much more fragmented. And now they're arranged in these networks and supply chains or supply networks. So they depend on relationships for control and integration as opposed to ownership as they did in the past. So which relationships do you see, say for a business like the ones you've been in, which of those relationships are the ones that are most critical to competitive advantage, supply chain relationships?
That's a hard one to answer. I think when you look at the benefits of a modular setup such as the one that you described versus the risks inherent in doing that, at this moment in time, the benefits outweigh the risks by some degree. However, philosophy around that changes every 10 years, right? Like, I think when you work in strategy, the trend at some point in time is, we need to kind of have this vertical integration. And then 10 years later, it's like, oh, no, that wasn't a good idea. Let's try something else. So it's basically a series of experiments, the way I look at it, albeit maybe experiments at a relatively large scale. And it's not just about the relationships. It's also about a lot of other factors, including physical and digital aspects of this, because the integration that you describe in the supply chain with a variety of separate entities collaborating, working together in a closely knit and tight network, and the dependency between each of these players, small or large, has completely changed the dynamics in supply chains and the capabilities of companies. We all know that today, when there is a small disruption somewhere, it has ripple-on effects throughout the entire supply chain and can, at the worst case, kind of lead to a complete standstill, and a reboot of that network might be required. And so when you think about relationship, it is not just a relationship at an interpersonal level. It is also a relationship at a infrastructure and physical level that has become entirely different from before. And so our ability to maintain, uphold, and develop the physical, the digital, and the human relationships, that in combination determines your success or failure.
Okay. Changing tack a little now and coming back to the cultural aspect. You're originally from Germany, but over the course of your career so far, you've lived and worked in many different countries, including Ireland, where we are here today, but also UK, US, Switzerland, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So what are the cultural differences that you have had to adjust to as a German that were the most challenging in these various places?
First and foremost, you will have noticed I lost my Irish lilt. Something I had to adapt to and adjust to. But no.
So when you left here, you had a slight Irish accent. Is that right?
Lilt. I think everyone said that. Yes. Yeah. And, unfortunately, I lost that. So that's a sad consequence of this kind of global mobility. Anyway, I have not developed a Texan slur either, so that's okay.
Good.
But to answer your question, I think that when you look at different cultures, let me pick out three that are very, very different and show you, the differences between these as I experienced them. Let's pick the German culture, the American culture, and the Chinese culture. And let's pick one aspect in business life that we can compare. In Germany, hierarchy is important, but team is also important, and to find consensus is important. So when you have meetings, when you interact with people, there is the need that is felt by everyone to find consensus. Yet the way to find the consensus is not necessarily by pussyfooting around difficult things. So the elephant in the room is oftentimes addressed at the beginning, and then then you try and kind of calibrate and negotiate your way forward. You look at America, it's very different. In America, hierarchy is also very important, but the directness in meetings, in conversations, is entirely different than in Germany. In the US, language that you use in meetings is highly codified. When someone says something is interesting, they basically tell you not to come back with it. When someone says, a certain other sentence, everyone who is kind of familiar with this knows what is meant. Someone who does not understand this coming from the outside, like a German meeting, Americans in an American meeting may walk away thinking, wow, this was a great meeting. We all agreed on things. And the Americans would say, well, we told him. and so there are these differences in how people socialize and how they grow up, what they understand to be acceptable and not acceptable. They're very different between these two, for example. China, again, is extremely different from the first two. China is extremely hierarchical. The boss is the boss, and everyone else is more or less kind of a minion. And at the same time, the Chinese are very big on the social, the togetherness. The decisions are taken in a group, not individually, and there are very complex inter-social relationships. So for them, being a part of a team and group being more important than individual are very important cultural elements and traits and guide their behavior. In Germany, when the boss tells you to do this and you feel this is not the right thing to do, you'd say so. In China, when the boss tells you to do this and that and you feel it's not the right thing to do, you don't. So culturally, there are great differences between these geographies. That makes for very interesting work when you work globally and with all these different cultures. And you have to be that ambassador between the cultures and try and help them to bridge these cultural gaps.
And where would you situate Ireland from your experience here on that continuum?
I'd say Ireland is a country where, in my experience, diplomacy lives, right? Like it really is, it is embedded in the culture to find the common ground, to negotiate towards something that everyone can live with, and to seek this, but also to be arbiters, to be able to kind of strike a balance between the interests of people. And when I look at the Irish in the European Union, you can tell that they may be a small nation, but they have a disproportionately large impact and influence on politics and also on how things are managed. Yeah? And that is, I attribute that very clearly to the strong cultural ability to basically use diplomacy to achieve outcomes and objectives.
So, where can people find out more about you and your thinking on business, on work, in the future, such as websites, LinkedIn, videos, publications, and so on?
Yeah. So one easy way, of course, is simple Google, as you did before. If you Google my name, Stefan Bungart, then you will find links to all sorts of things. But one very good way to connect with me and maybe also to read up on some of my thinking is LinkedIn, because in LinkedIn I publish little articles, pieces that reflect on different aspects, some of which, I mean, we did cover during our talk today. For example, what is the future of work? How should young people think about career? Do you need a personal brand? And other things that I reflect on and then share, and we can kind of discuss. So LinkedIn is a very good forum for people to connect with me.
So Stefan Bungart, that's Stefan, Stefan, and then Bungart's basically how it sounds, right? Bungart on LinkedIn.
It is.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, yeah. Stefan, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you today, to get those insights and views on the world of business and the future of work. And I thank you very, very sincerely for being here with us today.
And again, the pleasure is all mine, and thank you for having me.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you, Stefan.